first assume. Germany is the ADB's eighth biggest shareholder. It buys voting rights and thus influence. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was born at the beginning of this year, and this definitely means competition for the ADB. Some would have suggested that AIIB is actually a long name for Chinese Development Bank, but as it turned out, it's not at all only Chinese. The Chinese sought investments from other parts of the world, and they soon found it, with the UK as a big shareholder. Directly after that announcement, Germany followed suit, but it didn't only follow, it became the AIIB's fourth biggest shareholder, and is now part of a project that nobody actually knows what's going to happen with it. Nobody knows where the bank's going to be situated, what they're going to do, and especially how they will do the development that they strive for. And this is where we get to the discussion of tonight, the how of development. Social movements have been extremely active in advocating for human rights and environmental standards in the implementation of development projects, as we just heard in the last talk by Aram in the World Bank. The same goes for the Asian Development Bank. And they were actually very successful in doing so. The safeguard systems, that's the name for the standards that the projects financed by these banks have to comply with, are now much stronger than 20 years ago. And these are the ones that shall enshrine the rights of the affected people. And tonight we have three proponents of these successful advocacy here, and despite the successes they already had, they still got some work to do. And we will discuss the problems that we still have today with the so-called development projects financed by public development banks. And the foundation of the AIIB puts, I would guess, a new urgency to this agenda, because we can expect a conversion of the standards that all development banks give to themselves. Whether this will be an upward conversion or a downward conversion is still a matter of discussion. But let's first turn to the situation as we find it today. For this, I have three outstanding guests, which I would like to introduce shortly. I'll start with Rayyan Hassan, who is also going to be the first speaker. He is the executive director of the NGO Forum on ADB, an umbrella organization of which many actually made their way here. And they fight the Asian Development Bank from all over the globe, actually. Together with Urgewald, the Forum has organized the civil society activities around the ADB and brought together an impressive mix of activists from all over Asia. Before joining the NGO Forum, Rayyan was also an academic, working as senior lecturer at the East-West University in Dhaka and as a program officer for Action Aid. He's a renowned specialist in policy analysis and advocacy for people's safeguards and the environment. And as far as I know him, he will take it as a compliment when I say he's a pain in the ass for every banker. So welcome, Rayyan. The second guest we have tonight is Titi Soentero, to my right. She's a policy advisor at AXI, an organization for gender, social, and ecological justice in Indonesia. She's been very active in the women's movement in Southeast Asia for over 3 decades and is one of the most well-known women's rights activists in Indonesia. You don't think so? Before joining AXI, Titi also worked for several transnational organizations, including the NGO Forum, and was the head of the influential women's rights organization Solidaritas Perempuan. From early on, she was combining the so-called classical women's issues with other policy fields such as the environment, transparency, and participation. And she's also an expert on financial institutions and has a lot to say about climate finance. When I first met Titi, only a year ago, I think, it was in her beautiful home in Mendut. And since then, miraculously, our ways have always crossed again. And I'm very happy that this is the case. I'm very proud to have you here tonight. Our third speaker will be Chris Lang. He's a writer and researcher at Red Monitor and the ASEAN House. Actually, what I'm going to say now is not what he wrote to me, what I should say, but I found it so interesting. He worked as an architect, but then he decided he'd rather move to Thailand in the mid-1990s. And he worked with the Thai NGO Terra towards ecological recovery in the regional alliance. And more recently, he has worked in Indonesia with the World Rainforest Movement, where he also focused on ADB's financing of industrial tree plantations and on ADB's proposed forestry policy. And since 2008, he hosts a website called Red Monitor. Some of you might know it, especially those active on the environment. And he's really an expert on RED, that's reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And that's also what he's going to bring to the panel tonight. Thank you very much for being here, the three of you, and I'm looking forward to your presentations with Rayyan starting. Thank you. If you move it.
It is cold. That must be it. Alright. Well, it's not really a presentation because I see a lot of people who I work with 9 to 5 every day on this, and they've seen slides of this PowerPoint. Probably sick and tired of it.
Yeah.
So try to say something new, which I haven't said in the last 3 days. And with all due respect for listening to what we do at NGO Forum for the first time, yeah, feel free to ask questions or stop me halfway if you don't get it or whatever. I'll be happy to clarify. So these are basically our thoughts. And this is usually who we are. We're from everywhere. We work in South Asia, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India. We work in Southeast Asia, Philippines, Indonesia. We work in Thailand. We work in Cambodia. We work in Vietnam. We tried working in Myanmar and we're looking for the right kind of people. We work in Central Asia. We work in Kyrgyzstan. We work in Armenia, we work in Azerbaijan, we work everywhere. We work here in Germany with Urgawal, we work in Italy, I think now, with Antonio Tragago, in the AIB advocacy, both ends, Netherlands, Stephanie Friedulu Foundation, Hawaii. The places where we have started to work collectively, I think we can't call ourselves a network anymore. We're like an animal which is starting to just spread over with an idea which is kind of mad, just taking on global development financing capital. And that is quite a big, big challenge to take on. And we have different backgrounds and we have different strengths as civil society. So the trick is how we can learn from each other. And we have to go across language differences, we have to go across cultural differences, we have to go across ideological differences. But sometimes when you want to hold a multilateral development bank accountable, you do whatever it takes. Right? Alright, quick look at where ADB is. ADB is scared. I've been monitoring the ADB, working with the NGO Forum for the past 4 years, and initially when we would talk to the ADB seemed in control of what was happening in Asia in terms of the development finance landscape. It knew that it would build roads and highways wherever it wanted and fund a few dirty coal power plants wherever it wanted and fund a few dams wherever it wanted. And they will only have to shake hands with the World Bank once in a while to make sure things were going good. But in the last year, you had the rise of Chinese capital in development finance with AIIB, with the BRICS, and all of a sudden Asia is not poor anymore. It's got middle income growth in a lot of new countries. Inequality, yes, but there is a lot of money inherently there. And this is money which didn't come from development aid. It's actually hardworking people paying taxes, going to school, getting jobs, doing the 9 to 5. So somewhere down the line, us as civil society network, with a mandate, I hope, from the communities to do what we do, we're asking ourselves, are we really going in the right direction in our advocacy with the ADB? So, just to get, if you're looking over the bullet points, I won't go over all of them, I'll just go for the third one, because that's something which everybody's been talking about, and that's environmental and social safeguards. And NGO Forum on ADB precedes, it started in 1989, Hemanta, I think, late 80s. 89, there was a bunch of few groups, 30 odd groups in the Philippines, a few minds here, Ghani, who first thought of this challenging the ADB. And from that struggle onwards, there was a real demand for the need for the bank to address its environmental and social impact. The impacts were displacement, the impacts were destruction of forests, the impacts were irrigation land being swamped over with salt water where rice will never grow again. And there was no institutional rule or regulation within the institution to protect its actions on the ground. Civil society screamed out loud. Obviously, the scream was raw. It was unrefined. We didn't do our analysis right. We were just complaining. And from that knee-jerk reaction, it went both ways. The bank started to shift. Civil society started to get a bit more realistic about what propositions it wanted to put on the table. By 2006 to 2010, I think the forum became way more organized. It grew in different parts of the world. Support came in, funding came in. It was not always monetary resources which led to its strength. It was also the technical capacity and the know-how of other groups who were monitoring other banks. And we interacted. That's something which we always do. We discuss, we debate, we argue. There are fights in our general assemblies where the entire hotel or the venue, everybody knows that these guys are fighting. But that's what you need to do sometimes to work out a strategy. So, wrestling all that, we came to the ADB safeguards, which we don't think are being delivered. They're good on paper, but time and time again, they just don't talk to the people before they start building things. They don't say, we'll build a road in front of your house, they just go ahead and build it. And then they move you out of your house and they say, we'll give you money only if you apply for a complaint. I mean, that's what we're feeling, time and time again. This leads us to asking these three vital questions. It's been 49 years of the ADB, and this is my 4th annual governors meeting. Last year we chased them to Azerbaijan, before that Kazakhstan, and before that India, and before that, where were you? Japan. And then, yeah. And what do we get? What do we get out of all this investment? So, the first question is, 50 years of ADB operations, are people still poor in Asia? And did they recover from, did they fulfill their mandate? And we don't think they did. There's a 20% rise in inequality over the last 20 years in Asia. The richest of the rich are getting richer, but there's a huge gap. We also feel that we can't hold the bank accountable using its own mechanism. The ADB has been immune constitutionally from all its borrowers as the World Bank, and before that, I remember when I was in ActionAid and I was working on the World Bank Immunity Campaign because a Bangladeshi World Bank staffer decided to sue the World Bank in Bangladesh, and it had never been done before. Nobody sued the bank. And literally, all hell broke loose in our parliaments because the Minister of Finance was being lobbied by the World Bank, the country director, the World Bank president called him up. There's a lot of pressure on government for immunity. This led to a social movement in the streets. It became politicized. The opposition came in and started using that as a rhetoric. It never really got anywhere because the main champion in the parliament mysteriously gets gunned down somewhere. And there's nobody to oppose the bill in the next parliamentary session. World Bank gets immunity. World Bank continues lending, blah, blah, blah. So when we come into this kind of a situation and where we go with it, the question always remains, are we realistically looking at the power balance in which we're operating as civil society? So we're playing it, you're basically punching way above your weight class, right? Especially if your enemy is immune from your national laws. So how do you go about doing it? And we have to start thinking out of the box. And the debt never ends. So I think I've gone over this slide over what I've said in the past couple of minutes. Maybe it was more. But we're really assessing ourselves. What have we done? Where are we going? What did we gain institutionally? It's easier to speak from here after 2-3 days of policy level discussions. We are worried because whatever has been gained is going to be dismantled. If ADB and AIB and World Bank, they all start these co-financing and shifting their monies towards private capital, all the policies go out of the door. And that is going to be the reality in which they want to do development finance. So realistically, if we cannot hold the policy frontline, us as civil society also have to figure out how do we protect the needs of the people whom we claim to represent. So I'll just go through a little bit and then go back to some key questions. Do we have the right to challenge the legitimacy of the ADB specifically? Do we have the means to challenge? This is a very big question. On one end, we have members who are getting arrested or being threatened of getting arrested. In Cambodia, they're being threatened. In Pakistan, they are. In some cases, we get pulled off the airports and they question us for 1 hour, asking us who we met, why we met, and all that. So it's getting difficult. And sitting in Manila in the secretariat, and we work with our members everywhere. Last General Assembly, we asked them to do a reporting. What project were you monitoring? Reporting was dismal. Hardly anybody was taking risks in monitoring a project. Mainly, there's no funding. The second, are you kidding me, man? If I start poking my nose around that place, the cops are gonna beat me up. So it's real. So we also have to think about, are we putting people into harm's way, and if so, what kind of safety measures are we doing for the membership to continue their advocacy? Alright. So coming back to those 3 questions. These 3 keep on coming up in our discussions all the time. It's not about the goal, are we going to get there, but it's about all the work you need to do to get there. And I think that is where our work really starts making a difference. We realize that the state of play is our voices are not being heard, our positions are not being recognized, our security is not being enforced or protected in any way, mainly because we are just civil society. That cannot be. We need to sway public opinion. Just ask yourselves, is ADB good or bad? Some people will say yes, some people will say no. Is the World Bank good or bad? Probably more bad. Is the AIB bad? Bad. But realistically speaking, regular, average Facebooking public do not have a clear position when it comes to development finance institutions. So we realize there's a perception mishap here, and we're always talking among ourselves. Left green, left right, left social, left broken. It's as if we're pickling in our own brine with the left all the time, but we really need to get the average guy walking down the street eating a cheeseburger. To change his mind, we need to sway public opinion on our side. And if we don't, I don't think we can challenge any of the development financing institutions in the way we want to. This is what's happening. This is the new Silk Road. This is the One Belt, One Road. Inside the ADB, big conference hall, ADB president, I think he's going to build the damn thing. Even if an elephant comes in front of him, he's going to build over it. It doesn't matter. He's going with it. The black lines are the land routes. He wants to connect Kunming, China, all the way to Rotterdam, with railway lines, transport corridors, export processing zones, the whole nine yards. The blue lines are maritime silk routes. They want to trade through the ports. Already, if I go to the details of it, our investments in their ports, large-scale investments in their transport corridors, and everybody's asking us to open our borders off to connect highways for achieving sustainable development. We don't need that level of investment for sustainable development. We don't need a 900 megawatt of energy for rural electrification. We need scaled down development financing. So the amount of money that's out there, it's way too much. I'm from Asia, from Bangladesh. I can tell you, man, my government is going mad looking at the money. Their eyes are bulging out. But honestly, they've got a short-term myopic vision. But if they really address the needs of the people, probably 20% of that money would be good enough. Random picture to show shrinking space of civil society. This was the People's APEC, the APEC summit. Obama and everybody else came in and signed their treaties in the Philippines. And then we organized a people's rally, and me and Professor Talim, who was our board treasurer of the NGO Forum and president of Freedom of Debt Coalition. Yeah, sounds. I've got May right here who's the vice president. Yeah, we decided to take pictures in front of the rally, and that guy's not looking up the cup because he doesn't want his mother to know what he does for a living. So, but the space is really shrinking. They had drones coming up from behind the cops, videotaping who came to mobilize. So I don't think we're even ready to understand the consequence of some of the stupid stuff that we do. So our reaction as civil society was, let's not play within the rules or the confines of the banks. Let's really start having a different kind of a discussion where we directly start going into the needs of the people and the environment and the communities themselves. Yes, we will continually challenge institutional reform, but if we blindly keep on doing that in a foreign institution which is already immune, then how much change do you really expect? You might, and limited resources, limited energy, you need to be strategic in the way you work. So this is what we decided, and this was not just only the NGO Forum on ADB. We talked to other coalitions, other networks in Asia, like-minded groups, and we all sat together and we decided, this is what's happening, this is what they want to build, and we really need to reach out to everyone else, the indigenous peoples groups, the women's groups, the LGBT groups, the disabled, the people with disability groups, the anti-mining folks, because the climate folks, we have to bring everybody on board, the academics, the students, the millennials, you name it. And it's a people safeguard now. Because the people safeguard is about us. It's no longer civil society. It's about us, and are we going to be able to handle this level of infrastructure which is going to come our way. That means the engagement has to be national with our governments, engagement has to be local, actually identifying the leaders of the social movements at the village level. The fisherfolk community, the handicraft women's community, who leads them? What do they need to organize? And getting our groups to provide them those resources which they require to protect whatever little they have, which has not been taken away. So changing the perspective in the way we do things, I suppose. So all I need is to bring all of you on board into what we're doing. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I agreed to Andrew Felix's beautiful request of speaking in a university. It was to make sure that we reach out to a broader audience, which was not just us. If it's only 2 of you, share it on your Facebook, man. Give it to like 1,000 people. Hashtag is ADB good or bad? And you make up your own mind on this. You go to our website, you check out the damage they've done, and then you click. And that is all. Thank you.
I can bring it up.
Well, for us, it's actually it's still daylight, but I think it's already evening, no? So I was wondering when I was the first time, I said, wow, it's still 4 o'clock. But then I said, no, 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 it's already evening. So good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
And first of all, I would like to thank Felix to give us space to share information, view, thought, and also the passion to work against the injustices, and here triggered by the activities of the bank, because it is about so my part will be about cases, it's about women, and also about how we work against the immunity of the banks, not only the World Bank but also ADB as an immunity, and also AIIB. So those multilaterals, they are immune. So the immunity it means, that's the meaning of immunity. It means they are not, they cannot be prosecuted under national legal proceedings from tax. So it means the ADB staff working in Manila, they don't pay tax at all. And then all the data is also immune. You just cannot take it just like that. And many things. So it's defined in their what do you call it? In the charter. So with these situations, with this immunity, they operate in our countries. So to have a pictures a bit about how is the operation of the ADB in Asia. So this is only some examples to give you a pictures. For example, they are working on Asian highway network with totally 26,000 and more kilometers, or the railway projects around 4,500 kilometers. So some cases will be derived from this plan. So if you look at these lines, the red lines and the blue lines, and then you will realize that it will cut across people's land, because it is not a land, just a land, but it's land with many people and with their livelihoods, with that forest. Not only roads and railway, but also the what do you call it, the greedy, or the to get all the energy is also play a role by the infrastructure of pipelines for geothermals, hydro, gas, coal, and so on. Then it's really, if you see the map, it's really across the country. This is only the pictures of ASEAN. And then if you see, the industrial zone is also one of the infrastructures plan. So if you see, so I was amazed when I looked at these pictures, because then you will see the whole coastal area of Vietnam is actually already occupied by industrial zones. So those beautiful beach is not anymore owned by the people, but already owned by companies. And the controversial industrial zone in Burma, is also taken away people's land. And then we will deal with the One Belt, One Road plan of China. And then for Indonesia, it's really massive maritime infrastructures by building 26 ports, buying ships, and so on. So it's a really massive plan for the futures. So in these situations, the question is, what is the situations of women? To understand is a bit premises, or a bit of concept how to look of the situations of women. Because usually if you talk about women, then there will be a question, why don't you talk about men? Because they're also affected. So in the feminist lens, women is not a standing alone entity, but women is comprised of her political identity. It means women as a wife, women as a mother, women as a member of a bigger family. So the women is not never be women as women, but it's really connected to where she is. So it means if there is something affect her family or community, it means the woman will be also affected because that's the relations. So therefore, women's issue is not about women's issue alone, about her body, but it's also about their family, communities, and societies. Therefore, the call of women, the demands of women, is also the demands for her family, community, and society. So, but in these situations, the experience of women and men, although the source of problem is the same, but the situations they are facing is different because of the gender relations and also because of the sexuality, which is the control of society to her body, her work, and her mind. So therefore, if there is a disaster, for example, yes, men and women are affected by disaster, but their experiences in dealing with disaster different because of their gender role and of their sexuality. So the specific impacts of women will be increasing double and multiple burden, increase domestic violence. So in many, for example, natural disaster area, you can see that the domestic violence and violence against women increase. And also, women has less education if there is a problems with the less source of income, and then it's triggered the change of poverty. And usually, the problems if there is affliction also led to health services. So the health services for women is a specific because they need really clean water. That's the problem with the resettlement site in Cambodia, where they say there is water, but women need really clean water because they have to be, they are dealing with the reproductive health, which is really need that. And then they are more vulnerable to labor and sexual exploitations, and then also then those issues can further subordinate and marginalize women. So in this kind of situations, if we understand the situations of women in their context and the context of the family and communities, then we will try to look at her situation by 3 projects that forum also is actually the projects that forum working on together with the community. So there's the Highway 1 projects in Cambodia. So in the ADB renovated a road and affected 6,000 people in 1,200 households. And then compensation is differently. Some has a compensation full, some half, some so 4 years after displacement. And they are announced to move. Some of them partly experience the really forced displacement. So they experience differently, the difference of Grandma Cha. So she was alone. When she was displaced, she only has one relative. And because they are so poor, she only live in a barn with chicken and cows. And then I think it was a story told by Toshi, our colleagues who works for Mekong Watch, that she met the Grandma Cha and she told Toshi that I might die because I waited so long for my compensation. And then it was only $200. For us, it's not much, but for her, it's so much. And then I got the information that 2 weeks after that, she died because she was depressed, she felt alone, she has nothing. And the other woman also affected by the Highway 1 is, so the community, because they are not full compensated and it's not enough, they have to move from other place to other place. And then every time, because they didn't have money, they have to borrow from the what they call it, the money, the borrower. So then, after the interview, she will disappear because the money lender will came after her to get the money. So the people who are already affected, already suffering from the eviction, will get another burden because they just don't have money. And there is also violence from the money lender. So the groups led by Ming Chin, and Titi, she led the groups and together with the Mekong Watch and together with CDCAM and NGO Forum on Cambodia, then they start to have a process and then they file complaint to ADB accountability mechanism. They also do a lot of policy intervention, do campaign and many things. And then 14 years after the first time they heard that they will be affected, then they heard that ADB agreed to pay compensation. But the compensation is not directly, they have to wait like 1 year. Later, after Ming Chin went to Manila and knocked at the door of the ADB EDs by saying, "You said that I will get compensation, where is my money?" Then 2 weeks after that, the community get the money, which is part of it for paying the consultant. Another story is Song Bung 4 hydropower in Vietnam. So with this big size and expensive. And then it also affects the life of Katu community, the indigenous people in Laos, whose life depends on the river and the forest. So this forced displacement, and then they have to move to another area, which is not that good as their previous area because it's sloppy far from the river because the women work in the gardening. So they need water. Usually they just take from the river and then just give the water. But now they have to walk longer to fetch water for the garden. So it increased the burden of women because they are the one who do the gardening. And then so the situation is worse for them. And then one of the complaint that they also raised through the NGO in Laos is why they give the resettlement money. It was given to the men, and they say the men only sitting and drinking coffee and beer. We are the one who work. So if they give the money to the land, then we will know that it wasn't enough for our family. So, but there is no advocacy work furthermore, only some report on this case. So and it was like, you will see, it is not only physical infrastructure projects that will affect women. So therefore, I selected one of the case of Indonesia, which is not physical infrastructure project, but small education project, which is the madrasah education development projects that for 500 public and private madrasah over 27 districts in Indonesia. Do you know what madrasah? Madrasah is Islamic boarding school. So there is not only loan for 50 million, but also technical assistance, particularly from Australia. So we raised this issue because we are worried about this madrasah education program, the money for madrasah. So madrasah, this project is for places or locations, area where there is a strong raising of Islam fundamentalism and radicals in Indonesia. Some madrasah we already checked, and also there is a lot of publications that was the radicals who was involved in Bali bombing and so on. So the question is, we went to the executive director and said, why you support the Bali bombing and colleagues? And they say, no, because we want to fight the radicals, therefore we give the money. give money to change the curriculum, but the money is to make laboratoriums and to improve the building and so on, but nothing with the content of the teaching. So it means we say that they fail to analyze the madrasah in Indonesian context because madrasah is really depends on who owns the madrasah. If the owner of the madrasah is strong on Wahhabi influence, then you will see who will benefit from the support. Not only about the money, but the image that ADB support madrasah and also the system with in the places with Sharia laws is worrying. And then it also will increase the bias, gender injustices to women because usually in madrasah, the girls are sent to madrasah because they say madrasah is a good place to educate women, so they will be a good Islamic women in the perspective that they will only oblige the husband, they will never be a leader, and they will do all the things like what the women is expected in the conservative framework. But the boys won't be sent to madrasah because they have to go. So because they will look for the income, then they will send to the usual school. So it means there is already gender bias decisions where to send the children to school. So then this is the basic of the situation. So therefore, it's why we raise this case to the ADB. So some demands we sent to ADB because we met several times then with the EDs trying to raise the issue by saying, this is a problem if you support the madrasah. Therefore, they do some changings by introducing also the gender perspective in the madrasah. Started to do that. So that's some of experiences related to the women's situations. But if you see more, then across Asia, there's a lot of resistance against the ADB, against the World Bank. We can see from different activities, whether it is in South Asia, in the Mekong, or in other places. But aside of people resistance and rallies, we also with the NGO within the NGO forum doing like policy intervention, for example, for the ADB safeguard policy review. There is also inside and outside strategies. For another groups, they just do court cases because they cannot sue the ADB or World Bank, but they sue the Indonesian government for the privatization and then the company. And then, yes, the way of grievance mechanism, which is actually the internal system of ADB, of inspection panel, the internal system of the bank, because they are immune, they have this immunity, but they have to show that they have the accountability. So they have created those internal mechanism of accountability, which is very much depends on the decisions of the executive directors and also the borrowers. So independent in the maybe in the investigations, but in the decisions about compensation remedies, it really depends on the borrowers, the governments. Yeah, activities of NGO forums, publications, strategizing, research, and then this later on, because we are in Germany. So the question is, what you can do for us? Yeah, go on. Okay. So if you look at in ADB and Germany, so German plays a huge role actually in ADB. Not only as a contributor to the bank, but also for financing, consultancy, German company get also benefit from these banks. So if it is about the World Bank, German also plays a big role, AIIB also. We can look at the 14th rank. So then what you can do, because you pay the tax, then you need to ensure that your tax money do not bring problems or harm to the people in the developing country where get the money from the ADB. You can do it. You can do interference. Because if you talk about Germany, German is not because they have 4% here and there, but German is usually also not networking, but also collaborate or have the common goals. They work together with the other European country, and they're also in the usually in the position together with the Nordic countries. So actually, if the Germans has a position, usually is European Union and then the Nordic. So it's a huge part of decision making. So that's some you can do, looking at the safeguard, looking at your money and work harder. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the word target will go on.
That's yours, right?
Yeah. Okay. I was asked to talk about the Asian Development Bank and RAY. And so I did a bit of research and found out that the Asian Development Bank isn't very involved in RAY. So that's the good news. The second bit of good news is that means my talk will be very short. I don't get to be extremely short because I can't get to the next slide. Okay, no. Okay, so I'm going to talk briefly about the Asian Development Bank and forests and the impact of a few of the bank's projects on the people and forests, particularly in the Mekong region, but also a bit in Indonesia. So the first Asian Development Bank forestry loan was in 1977. And by 2008, the bank had given out $1 billion for forestry projects. More than 80% of these projects were for establishing industrial tree plantations. And many of these projects failed. They chose the wrong species, the plantations burnt down, they didn't treat them properly, so they died of disease. And one of the most serious problems is that the land that they were planting the trees on was already in use by the people living there. So I'll give a couple of examples of these disastrous projects. One in Indonesia, where the bank wanted to plant 51,000 hectares on unproductive shrubs and grasslands. And that's a euphemism that the bank uses for people's land. By the time the project finished, they'd only managed to plant half of the area, and the ADB's project completion report describes the damage to the plantations by fires and the failure of species to grow as staggering. That's the ADB's word. They're staggered at their own failure. Land conflicts increased as a result of the project. It's gone completely blank. What have I done? Interesting.
That's again.
Okay. No, it's really gone blank.
We'll check the other one.
Because there was a PowerPoint. Sorry about that. I can carry on talking, actually. Shall I carry on talking while we're waiting for it? Okay, so the next example. Oh, it's that. Number 4. The next, walk around now. The next example I wanted to talk about was the Asian Development Bank's tree plantations project in Laos. And the idea of this project was that the ADB was going to give loans to farmers to plant eucalyptus trees. After 5 or 6 years, the farmers would cut the trees down, sell the trees, and then they could repay the loans and hopefully get some profit. Unfortunately, many of the trees didn't grow, leaving the farmers with no means to repay the loans. The ADB also funded companies that bulldozed forests, bulldozed villages' commons, and bulldozed their farmlands just to plant eucalyptus trees. And eventually the ADB admitted that its project had led to increased poverty and increased debt. And I happened to be in Laos just at the time. This is an ADB funded plantation just after the bulldozers had gone through and flattened the forest. And it's not only the forest loans that affect forests and the people living in the forest. Titi showed a picture of all the roads that the Asian Development Bank is building. And one of these roads went from Savannakhet in Laos over to the coast to a port called Dong Ha. And it's a logging road. Vietnamese companies use it. It's a logging road for illegal logging. They use it to export illegally logged timber in Laos to Vietnam and from Vietnam to China. And the ADB, before it gave the loan, actually admitted that this would make illegal trade of wildlife and log export worse. So, the Asian Development Bank has a forest policy, which in theory should stop everything that I've just described. Of course it doesn't. But in June 2000, the ADB started a review of its forest policy. 2 years later, it held a series of consultations. After the consultations, it drafted a new policy. June 2003, it posted a draft version of its forest policy on its website. And at some stage, I wrote a critique of this, which, for reasons I can't understand, really seemed to upset the bank. And the ADB's board rejected the draft policy. And one of the fascinating things for me about this whole story was all the way through the Asian Development Bank was saying, we're transparent, we're consulting with you, we're letting you know what's happening. So after the ADB's board had rejected this draft policy, the ADB's website said, we'll make a new policy available in January. And then they asked for comments on the 2003 draft that had already been rejected. But they didn't tell anyone that that had already been rejected. And then January came and went and they said, oh well, we'll do it in July. Then in September, we got a leak of a memo from the US executive director who basically took our critique and sent it internally to the Secretary of the Asian Development Bank, took the NGO critique and used it. So with this bit of push, we got 24 NGOs, and this wasn't just me like sitting there typing away like crazy. Friends of the Earth International was involved, NGO Forum on the ADB was involved. And altogether 24 NGOs wrote a letter to the then ADB president, pointing out what was going wrong in this whole process. We didn't get a reply. Then in April
2005, so we're now 5 years into this process. We got the leaked internal memorandum, which told us that there was a new forest policy, R paper, and R means restricted. In other words, not available to the public. And this was going to be presented to the ADB's board. A few months later, October 2005, we still hadn't seen anything. So I wrote to the ADB president asking what was going on. 4 months later, I got a reply saying the work on the revised policy has been put on hold. So 6 years process with a result of absolutely nothing. And today, when you go to the World Bank's, Asian Development Bank's website on forestry, here's the bank's policy on forestry. And if you look, the date is March 1995. And quite a lot has changed in that period. And one of the really big things that has changed is that this peculiar thing called red has come along. How many people know what red is? Yeah. Okay, for those that don't, there's a really good website at the bottom called Red Money. I'll give you a 30-second introduction to what RED is. It stands for Reduced Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. And it's a simple idea. The idea is to pay countries for keeping forests standing. It's basically a carbon trading mechanism, which means that the carbon stored in forests and trees is traded off against continued pollution of greenhouse gases somewhere else. So obviously it's problematic. RED is riddled with many complexities. I'm going to go through this very quickly. This is some of the problems with RED. It's a performance-based system, which means that the money is paid after the emissions reductions have taken place, which means that the countries that are implementing RED have to pay for it themselves. And then they can say, oh, we've done all the work, can you give us the money? I can't see that happening. Maybe I'm too cynical. Another massive problem is that countries have to invent a baseline of what would have happened in the absence of the RED project. And trying to predict what would happen in the future in the absence of something is impossible unless you've got a crystal ball that works. The next problem is the definition of a forest has not been defined within the RED context. So different countries have different definitions. Different institutions have different definitions. It's not been decided where the money should go to, whether it should go to communities who are protecting the forest, or whether it should go to palm oil companies to pay them off to stop them from cutting the forest. There's no agreement on how RED should be financed. And RED assumes that by giving governments money, or promising governments money, that they're going to change the way they behave towards their forests. But a hell of a lot of forest destruction is the result of illegal activities. And as a result of that, governments lose huge amounts of tax. And then there's a quotation which kind of half goes off the page, so it's basically repeating what I've just said there. The interesting thing is the source for this whole critique of RED that I've just given to you didn't come from my website or any of the normal critics of RED. It came from this report published by the Asian Development Bank, which to me was a bit of a surprise, I have to admit. It's very rare that I've read something sensible in any Asian Development Bank report. However, don't worry. The Asian Development Bank's policy on RED appears to be, RED isn't working, but hey, we're going to do it anyway. So if we look at the case of Indonesia, for example, 7 years ago, Norway offered Indonesia $1 billion in a RED deal. If Indonesia could reduce its deforestation, it gets $1 billion. Yeah, so far, the Asian Development Bank says progress has been limited. The Norwegian government says the same thing. But, at the same time, the Asian Development Bank says in the same report that critiques RED, they say RED is critical to medium-term mitigation costs, especially in Indonesia. And then they say deforestation reductions can be made at low opportunity costs as Indonesia has large areas of unproductive degraded grassland. And there's that term again, unproductive degraded land. This is villagers' land again. And now it's exactly what they were talking about with their previous plantation project. And yeah, so basically some things have changed, the forest policy hasn't changed, and the ADB's strategy on forest is exactly the same as it always has been. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much to the three of you. Since we're among us, I don't think we have to make formal questions and have each of you respond. I'll just add one thought and then I'd open up to everybody, and if there's comments or questions, we can just mix that up. I just wanted to, I wanted to invite somebody from the ADB, but the gatekeeper didn't let me through. So he told me I was having the BBC as a, well, what do you say? Doesn't matter. The BBC is not here, so they didn't want to come. But instead of that, I wanted to quote Nassim Ahmad, the Deputy Director of General of the ADB from yesterday, because he was talking to you, Titi. He said, of the 700 projects that went to the board in the last 10 years, only 9 went to the accountability mechanism. That shows the high quality of projects that don't have human rights and environmental issues. Then obviously you laughed, and what he said then was, I know you have a different interpretation of the situation. I like that interpretation. And with this thought, I've been thinking about that for the whole last 24 hours, because I thought it kind of shows that this mechanism is there, but it's seen as a totally different thing by you guys, in this case also by me and by the ones in the institution. And with having this in mind, I was asking myself what the strategies could be to either use this mechanism, to build on it, to mainstream it, or to actually say at one point, it's not working. We should go other paths. So with that in mind, I'd open to either you, somebody from the floor. Also, if you have questions, please feel free to comment. You can answer.
Okay. So the problems with the ADB accountability mechanism, aside of the internal mechanism and so on, is people don't have trust whether this mechanism work or not. Therefore, I laughed yesterday because my interpretation is not because ADB did good job, but actually people just don't trust these institutions. So the mechanism, first, this mechanism is not introduced to the people. We asked during the accountability mechanism review that the mechanism should be introduced at the time when the project is introduced. So that people will know, oh yeah, if we are not happy, we can go. And then reject the accountability mechanism review team reject by saying, if we introduce accountability mechanism at the same time with the project introduction, then they will say this project must be problematic. So therefore they don't want. So the stage is also complicated and it takes time. It's a long time, and one they already agreed for acknowledging the problems and mistakes and so on, and committed to give remedies, then the people have to wait again. So the Cambodian community wait for 14 years for that. So there's a lot of things that make this mechanism is not trusted by the people to use it. But for the campaigner, this is an opportunity to do campaign by saying that, see, ADB also acknowledge that they make mistakes. That's the thing that we can use that one. But of course, then we are in the different situations with the community who's really desperate to get something out, because they really need the compensation, they really need to survive if they are forced evicted.
Well, thank you, Titi. I think you basically walked through the entire process pretty much and the struggles that we face every day on it. The only thing I would probably bring into that discussion about the accountability mechanism is if ADB's lending is going to go towards the private sector oriented lending, and which it is going to. It has a goal to shift its entire portfolio 50% in private sector project lending. Then all bets are off. None of the policies, the safeguards stick on private sector projects because it's all self-reporting done by private operators, which basically makes the accountability mechanism completely defunct. It's a bad system anyway, completely bureaucratic, but later on it's going to be obsolete. And what is our response to that? I think forum itself has to do its homework, really, to come up with a position. I don't know what we're going to do.
Can I say something? It's actually been a while since I interacted with the ADB, so this may not be relevant. But in the case of Laos with the industrial tree plantation project, there was supposed to be two parts of the project. And a few of us had visited the project and realized what a complete disaster it was. And we kept writing about it, for example, in the World Rainforest Movement Bulletin and various other fairly small-scale things. It didn't get into the international media at all. But the ADB, for some reason, was listening to us. And they actually did a review of the project. And the review was totally slammed the project and cancelled the second phase of the project. So for me, a lesson from that was not to worry about accountability mechanisms and standards or anything that the bank is doing, but just to humiliate them on the grounds that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, regardless. Which worked in that one case, that doesn't mean it will always work.
Yeah, I heard with interest that I don't know, I don't remember whose slide it was, but that there was a court case in an Indonesian court, and that actually the Constitutional Court of Indonesia abolished the land law. I don't know, somebody of you said it. So I was just wondering whether, at least in some countries, it might be a solution to sue your government, because I mean, ultimately they have to decide the project. They're responsible for them. It's not just the ADB; it's also the government of the respective country. I don't know whether it works in all countries, but maybe in some. And the second thing on your immunity thing, I mean, we've been discussing it before briefly. How should you go about it? I mean, there has been a case in France which is quite interesting on diplomatic immunity, And the point about immunity is that, I mean, development banks, it's not given like God that they knew, but the immunity is conferred upon them by all shareholders, and it's included in the law, the law of ratification of the respective statute of each bank. In Germany is the case. So basically, all the governments of all shareholders, by conferring immunity onto the development bank, take away a part of the right to access to justice from their citizens. And for diplomatic immunity in France, the Constitutional Court of France has decided that if the government confers immunity to an institution or whatever, and thus sort of limits the right to access to justice of its citizens, it has at least to set up a sort of a compensation fund. In this case, it was for how do you say, people working in households of diplomats who are sort of thrown out or suffered terribly or were sort of modern slave labor or whatever, and they couldn't go to court against those diplomats because of the diplomatic immunity. So I don't know whether this would be sort of a way of, again, going against the governments and not against the bank. Because I think taking away the immunity of the bank, maybe if you really can establish that it's a crime against humanity, but you would need, this would be really a legal debate. But yeah.
Any other comments?
Actually, two comments. One on the immunity case. One idea that is flowing around at the World Bank campaigners is to expose that all World Bank employees are completely tax exempt and have lots of bonuses, and so
cheap cafeteria.
yeah, and the cheap cafeteria subsidized because they're so poor. Actually, in Washington, it's the cheapest restaurant you can get with good food. But to run a campaign to tax those people 5 to 10% of their income and put it into a fund that is supervised by CSOs and affected communities. But this has to be put into action as a campaign. The other thing is, one relief for you, Chris. In 2018, there will be a full review of all safeguards at the ADB, and then I guess your ancient forest policy will be gone at the end.
Now, I think we have to go back to the beginning of how the World Bank came. World Bank was not meant to support all other countries, but after the Second World War, it ordered to build the Europe again. So once they collected all the money and they have a surplus money, and then they expanded into other regions. The Asian Development Bank started on the same way. It is not about building or reducing the poverty or supporting the local people, but it's about making much more and more businesses for those companies to operate in other places. I think if we look at the policies to safeguard the local people, I think it is not. I think it is to safeguard those companies to go and operate in different places. But when people start complaining or fighting, then there should be some sort of a guideline to control those things. I think the safeguard is providing that, because if you think about the safeguard, the ADB safeguard is environmental safeguard, social safeguards, and maybe the indigenous peoples. So that's all. But if you look at the World Bank safeguard, I think maybe there were more than 10 safeguard policies. The pesticide, dumping pesticide in all over. Under the World Bank, it is controlled, but under the Asian Development Bank, there's no control on that. Even putting DDT, it's a safeguard in World Bank, but it's not in Asian Development Bank. So, public communication policy or the accountability mechanism, all of them came to my understand, to safeguard the companies operate and not for us. But we are using because we don't have any other mechanism to do this thing. That's my understanding. And also the ADB is showing that when the ADB came into their overarching mandate is reducing poverty in Asia, but they still have more than 750 million people in poor. If you look at China, I think maybe more than 20-25% Chinese people are still below the poverty line. And if the China has surplus money, if they really want to build, why not they give the food and health and all these things to Chinese people? Why they want to have the connectivity to Europe? Because they're talking about the money market, it's not about the really poverty alleviation. But if you look at some of the documents came in the Asian Development Bank around 2008, they were talking about, they agree that more than 750 million people are in poverty pockets, but instead instead of supporting them, they were thinking about building the middle class. Even yesterday, the German Chancellor mentioned about this thing. You build the middle class, and they want to have the luxury, but still they want to have some people to have the labor. So they are keeping these 750 million people to provide labor for the middle income people. Unless we have those, why this class problem is there, unless we settle the class problem, so these issues will be there. I'm sure none of these banks, including the AIB, really interested to resolve the poverty issue. If sustainable development goals is not about the poverty issue, they don't want to handle. I think if we want to get together around that, why they are not resolving the poverty, I think that's the question we want to ask ourselves. And whether the ADB, World Bank, AIIB, all these bankers are ready to do that. Thank you.
I just wanted to say, Hamanta, when you say that the safeguards are not for the people, it's also that your own success is not mentioned. So, as an advertising campaign, you could also say we're fighting for the safeguards, and that was our success.
Well, it's also interesting to note some of the studies that ADB itself funds. For example, there's a study on multidimensional poverty based on purchasing power parity, food security, and vulnerability to climate change. And it says in that study that if you use these standards, the poor in Asia would be 1.7 billion and not the 700 plus million. So things like this we can use also in our campaign and focusing.
Okay, I see many very tired people. I think all of you had long days, and that's why I think it's good to stop here. And I wish all of you a very nice night and a good week in Frankfurt. Much success. I hope you can also see something of the city, not only the ugly messe, and maybe we can have beer and rice afterwards. Have a good night. Thank you all.